Yo guys, Jonathan here, and this is an exclusive in-depth look at the 2019 Mac Pro. So last week at WWDC, I got a chance to spend some extended time not only with the Pro Display XDR, which I already covered, but also the Mac Pro. So I want to take all of that, all of the bits and pieces of information we've learned since then, and compile that into as in-depth of a video as I possibly could, essentially until the Mac Pro arrives, which looks like it might be as early as September. In a lot of ways, the new Mac Pro is very similar to the older modular Mac Pro tower, but at the same time, it is completely different. It starts with a stainless steel frame that also doubles as handles if you wanted to move it around in a studio environment. That is then paired with this crazy aluminum housing that's removable and gives you 360-degree access to everything inside. As far as what you can pack inside this Mac Pro, it gets a little ridiculous, up to 28 cores, 1.5 terabytes of RAM. Not storage, RAM, up to 4 GPUs, and more importantly, it's not only expandable, it's modular. When Apple released this Mac Pro, the trash can Mac Pro back in 2013, it was by far the most powerful Mac you could pick up. It was small, it was compact, it was radically different than any other Mac out there, but it was anything but modular, and that left a lot of pros feeling left out in the dark.
You know, when they designed themselves in the thermal box of the trash can, it was like, great, now what are we gonna do with this thing? We're limited to Thunderbolt expansions, and now they've given the pros will really appreciate what they've done. People who look at the Mac Pro and say it's, you know, it's silly or it's too expensive, don't understand what it means to a pro user where time is money. And for people who are working at the highest levels, where rendering or bouncing or offline bouncing or audio workflows, where time is money to us, that machine will pay for itself inside of 6 months, easy.
That was Andrew Dawson, one of the most talented, but also one of the most down-to-earth, coolest, humble dudes I've got a chance to work with. He's an audio engineer that's worked with everyone from Kanye to Childish Gambino to Fun to Destiny's Child, Where My Soldier's At. And I remember during the keynote when they announced the Mac Pro, immediately wanted to hear his take on it because really, someone like him is who this Mac Pro is geared for. That right there kind of brings us to the notion of need versus want, because in reality, most of us don't need a Mac Pro, and I'm including myself in that mix. This is for Pro Tools sessions, recording entire orchestras with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tracks, 4D work in Maya, or what you're looking at right here is the actual virtual movie set in Toy Story 4. Going back to the lack of modularity with that 2013 Mac Pro, yeah, you could upgrade the RAM, the storage, to an extent, the CPU, but that was about it. There was no PCI expansion. You were limited to Thunderbolt. Enter the 2019 Mac Pro, where yes, PCIe expansion is back. There's more of it than ever, but where I feel the game changer is what Apple is calling their Mpx module, which so many people are getting wrong.
They have PCIe slots, but they're like double wide PCIe slots, with one part of it being like a normal PCIe slot and then another part being like the power/Thunderbolt connector slot. Basically Apple's way of saying, oh, you want to put in your own graphics card? You better buy it from us or else it's not gonna work.
For whatever reason, they think Apple is just making this dumb proprietary box to trap people into the system and completely missing or ignoring the fact that one, there are PCIe expansion slots, and two, Apple is giving you power on the machine to add your own graphics card if you wanted to. There are just way more advantages with the Mpx module. So the Mpx module takes your standard PCIe connector and then adds a second one that does two things. One, it gives you a ton of power, and actually one single Mpx module delivers as much power as the previous generation Mac Pro by itself, and two, it adds Thunderbolt and data, which is not something you would get with your traditional graphics card. For starters, you can sandwich two Radeon Pro Vega 2s into a single module. You have a direct connection for faster data transfer, and it also doubles as a cooling solution for the GPU, so you're not gonna have to rely on 13 fans to keep this cool. Now inside the Mac Pro, there is room for two full-size Mpx modules, so if you wanted to, you could max this out with a total of 4 GPUs, which is bananas, but what people are also missing is that it's not just limited to graphics. This thing, which is a RAID enclosure from Promise. It's heavy, it's as big as my head, maybe bigger, but they've already announced an Mpx module that packs 32 terabytes of RAID that just slots into the Mac Pro. That's amazing. Seriously, not only is that big, it's bulky, it's a second source of power, whereas that's not something you have to worry about with the Mac Pro, and that's why it's so special. Now, I've seen some comments on the base configuration with the Mac Pro, and specifically that RX 580. And you really gotta sit back and realize that this machine isn't just for video editors, and in fact, in an audio world, that actually makes perfect sense. One, they're not gonna need that kind of graphics power because audio applications are more CPU and RAM intensive, and two, that's gonna leave you more space for PCIe expansion, which is huge. In the Pro Tools world, they use these small DSP accelerator cards that pop into the PCI Express slot. And mind you, one of these will cost you nearly $4,000. So that gives you an idea of what you're dealing with in the pro world, but it's essentially like Afterburner, but for audio. So the more cards you can slot in, the more tracks, the more voices, the more complex your session can be. And going back to the original modular Mac Pro tower, because mind you, this wasn't an option with the 2013 Mac Pro, the max you could throw in there was 3. So with this Mac Pro and those graphics in the smaller form factor, that's what allows you to get up to 6 of them in this machine, which is huge.
What they had to do before was sync a bunch of machines together to run the sessions and the track counts they need with the DSP accelerator cards that were, the Avid HDX cards. Now they can run it all on one machine. They can run the music, session. They can run the dialogue session, the sound effects, the ADR. They can run it all on one machine, which just takes the complexity out of, syncing together sample accurate machines. And it's kind of a giant colossal pain to get everything to work right, where you can have it in one box and get everything to rock under one hood. It makes it so much easier.
That's going to translate directly over to Logic Pro 10 as well, with higher sample rates, more plugins, more virtual instruments, more tracks, and that's what you're paying for with the Mac Pro, the ability to cater it to exactly what you do. Now, breaking down the CPU options with this Mac Pro, because it does get a little bit crazy, you have options of 8, 12, 16, 24, and a ridiculous 28 cores. And for that guy who's about to say you don't need 28 cores, you don't need 28 cores, but this guy definitely does. What's happening here is a 6K HDR Maya project, and if you look towards the bottom of the screen, you can see those cores being put to work, and that is a beautiful thing. Now, I would say the 12 and 16 core options are probably gonna be the sweet spot in terms of best bang for your buck. One, you're getting faster memory, and two, you're getting more cores, more threads, more cache, but also keeping the base clock speed really high. Now, I've seen some discussion of the base Mac Pro being slower than the iMac Pro, and there's some truth with the iMac Pro having better graphics, but the CPU comparison is a little bit weird. With the Mac Pro, you're getting newer architecture, a higher base clock, more cache, and more importantly, a much better cooling solution. You're not gonna get this kind of heat sink in an iMac Pro. If anything, I think that speaks volumes to how capable a machine the iMac Pro is. And I remember thinking to myself when the iMac Pro came out, if this was it, if Apple never released a Mac Pro, I would be fine because that was more than enough power. At the Mac Pro event, they had this crazy camera robot for motorized precision, which you've probably seen in MKBHD videos, and attached to that was an unreleased Canon 8K camera, you are welcome Canon rumors, that was capturing 8K ProRes video. That was then sent into motion where they keyed out the background and then applied these complex 3D titles and elements. It was playing back in real time, and the end result looked like something that was entirely rendered, but it wasn't, and the crazier part is that was all done on an iMac Pro. That right there I think is a giant reminder that if you're upset with the entry price of the Mac Pro, you probably shouldn't buy one, and also realize that, hey, there are actually a ton of capable options right in front of you. Back when they released the 2013 Mac Pro, or especially back with the modular Mac Pro tower, you didn't have the options that you have alongside that today. There was no iMac Pro, there were no 5K iMacs with 8-core CPUs, you didn't have a 21-inch iMac with 6-core processors and Vega graphics. It was a completely different time. Going back to that 2013 Mac Pro, people were upset that it wasn't pro enough, and this time, it's almost like people are pissed off that they delivered a machine that was too pro. Again, this is a machine for high-level workflows, and what you're looking at right now is a beautiful HDR time-lapse video that actually started from over 700 raw 6K photos. The workflow with this starts in Lightroom, where you import, you do your correction, your color. It is then sent over to LR Timelapse, which takes every single one of those photos and applies a uniform exposure across everything, which is super complex. If you've ever worked in a program like this, or even Lightroom, and tried to export that many high-res lossless photos, that takes a ton of time. As far as the performance you could expect with this Mac Pro, Apple is claiming it's supposed to be twice as fast as the previous generation, and that goes back to what Andrew said, for pros, time is money. Now what's happening here is there are 3 streams of 8K ProRes video stacked on top of each other in a single timeline. It's HDR, there's effects, there's color correction, and that's happening in real time, playing back in full quality. Like you would have to throw that into 1/64th quality just to play that back in Premiere. Jokes aside, it's a really impressive setup, and it also gives us a look at the Afterburner card, which is optimized for ProRes and ProRes RAW. The idea with this is that it's taking the workload off the CPU, off the GPU, which frees those up for other tasks, but what's awesome is that it's relatively compact. It's not taken away from any of those Mpx modules, so if you wanted to, you could stack this with 4 GPUs and that Afterburner card on top. Now, if you're furiously typing into your keyboard that there are more video programs than just Final Cut Pro 10, I got you. Here's a look at Resolve 16, which is coming out soon, paired with the new Mac Pro. What's happening here is you have that same 8K footage with color correction, and if you look closely, you got 4 nodes going on and everything is playing back in full quality. Now, while we're in the video editing world, because the storage on this Mac Pro is tied to a T2 chip, you're also getting the same HEVC encoding like you would on an iMac Pro, just minus Hey Siri. Now, the biggest advantage with that T2 chip is going to be hardware level encryption on your storage, which might not seem like a big deal to a lot of you out there, but when you're dealing with movie assets, NDAs, unreleased songs, things that you don't want people having access to, that is a huge deal. Yes, I would have loved to have seen a higher capacity option in terms of storage with the baseline Mac Pro. 256 gigabytes is a little on the weaker end, but you can max this out up to 4 terabytes, and I think a lot of people will take advantage of 10 gig E, and also you have that option to expand internally with something like that promised Mpx module. Saving the best for last, because without a doubt, the biggest, baddest, most enticing, innovative feature on this new Mac Pro, forget an Mpx module, is the ability to rock these wheels. Can your PC do that? I am kidding. Please don't answer that. This though has been your first look at the 2019 Mac Pro. I'm excited, and if you've made it this far, virtual high five, and definitely check out my video on the Pro Display XDR, because much like the Mac Pro, I think that's also underrated.